Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Ben Brown. We're going to be taking a look at tomorrow's newspapers in just a moment with my guests here in the studio. But before that, let's just remind you of our latest BBC News headlines. And Labour's Deputy Leader Tom Watson says now is not the time for a leadership contest, but warns the party must do better at winning over voters. President Trump announces that he will not be attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year. A man has died and 2 other people have been injured after a man drove a car into pedestrians in the German city of Heidelberg. 3 men have appeared in court on slavery charges after the discovery of a cannabis factory at a disused nuclear bunker in Wiltshire. And coming up at 10:45, a roundup of this week's best stories from across the globe in Reporters. So welcome to our look ahead at what's going to be in the newspapers for you tomorrow morning. With us here in the studio, Caroline Wheeler, political editor of the Sunday Express, and Ashworth, assistant editor at the Times newspaper. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's take you through the papers that we have so far, actually. Not too many, but the Sunday Telegraph has an interview with a new independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Max Hill, who warns that the threat of terror attacks is at its highest since the 1970s. And the Sunday Times, changes to visa regulations for migrants is the lead story. The paper says plans include limiting access to benefits for new arrivals to the United Kingdom. The Sunday Express has more details about the man who murdered the children's author Helen Bailey. So then, let us begin with the Sunday Telegraph, and an interesting story about the Lords, really, and the Brexit bill, saying the peers are uniting to soften Brexit. And Theresa May might not like this. She was there watching the beginning of their debate, wasn't she? Just under the throne.
She was there hanging over their shoulders, basically imploring them to do the right thing and to follow what she would see as the will of the people. Next week we see the bill return to the House of Lords, and this time, unlike in the House of Commons where there weren't any amendments put forward to the bill and it passed through the House of Commons, there will be opportunities for peers to put down amendments, and indeed they have, many of them, but the ones that are sort of gaining the most support include one which promises to guarantee rights of the EU citizens already living here, and also one that would give everybody in Parliament an opportunity to sort of vote on the final deal when it's done. And it's interesting because if you think about the composition of the House of Lords, you know, they don't have the kind of same issue of patronage that they do in the House of Commons, so that in that sense they're a lot freer to sort of vote with their conscience. And indeed, many of them are now telling the Sunday Telegraph that they are going to put forward these amendments and vote for them, and that they're saying basically they feel that this is such a big issue that the timetable is too short for them to look at this issue, and they want to be given an opportunity to make amendments and to actually do the job that they're there for.
But some people have said the British people voted on this. The House of Commons pushed this bill through without amendment, without change. So how can it be that the unelected Lords should amend it or change it?
And this is why there's going to be so much fuss about the intervention of the Lords into this, and I think we're going to have a very exciting political battle because these people have, as Caroline said, little to lose. They can be the awkward scotch. They are in this age of protest. That's the role that they can fulfil. And I think there are a great many people who would have supported Brexit, but not necessarily hard Brexit, and want to see it done on terms. How we do this, how we exit the EU, will determine our political and economic life, and it needs to be done carefully. And some of the issues that maybe that we should have a second look at the final deal before we sign or whatever it is to exit is maybe a thing that even some people who voted for Brexit would support.
And Caroline, Gina Miller, who's the woman, the businesswoman who brought the legal case that I was following at the Supreme Court, actually, that ended with all of this being debated in Parliament. She has said the Lords need to show some backbone on the Brexit bill.
Yes, I mean, in a sense, you would expect her to say exactly this. I mean, she led that sort of battle, as it were, through the courts to make sure that Parliament did get a say on whether or not we trigger Article 50. That's now what the bill is going to do, that's going through the Lords. And she's basically now, in this piece to The Independent, imploring the Lords to actually do what she considers is their role. I mean, they are there as a revising chamber, as a scrutinising chamber, and she's saying basically that the Prime Minister has been a bit of a bully, and I think she's using the idea that she turned up it's very unusual for a Prime Minister to turn up in the House of Lords under those circumstances, and saying, actually, you need to show your muscle now, and if you're not happy with aspects of the bill, you must vote for the amendments.
Yeah. And in many quarters, Gina Miller is a bit of a heroine for another reason, for her great campaign on investment charges, on how much we pay to have our money invested in stock market funds. And I think there is a deal of sympathy for her, but there is going to be a massive battle. This is brewing. It's going to keep us going throughout March, April, May and the year beyond.
Yeah, so, I mean, Gina Miller there on the Independent front page. Do you admire her as the woman who brought this case? She came in for a lot of stick from certain quarters, didn't she?
Well, she has had a lot of stick, and, a lot of people will say in response to what she did, well, the public had their say. They were very clear what they voted for on June the 23rd, and they voted for Brexit, and actually the idea that it then has to be brought back before Parliament is kind of unnecessary, because it's almost a hurdle that's not warranted given the people had their direct say. Having said that, I mean, yes, I mean, she's clearly standing up for principles that she thinks are very important. She thinks that this is something she must do, and the fact that she went to such lengths to do it, whether you're on either side of the Brexit fence, I suppose you have to admire her for doing it. Yeah. It's not been an easy thing to do, and I'm sure she's suffered at the hands of it.
She has faced down the most extraordinary social media torrent of abuse
death
against
threats,
her.
in fact.
Yes, and she cannot go safely to a public place, or so she has been told, which shows the depth of the emotion. But I really do believe...
And Nigel Farage says the same about, on the opposite side of the fence, he has the same issues there. He claims that he's also vilified in the same way that she has been.
Can't go out of the house for fear of the liberal press, I think the phrase is.
Let's go to the Sunday Times, still on the Brexit story, and they've got a story from Tim Shipman, their political editor, talking about there's going to be a visa revolution for foreign workers. That's his angle on it.
Yes, I mean, migration is never far away from the agenda when we're talking about Brexit. Lots of people will say that that was the main thing that people were rejecting when they voted for Brexit on June the 23rd, was that they wanted to have a control on who comes into the country. And, of course, this week we saw David Davis actually admitting that it was going to take some time for us to start bringing down the level of migration that we already have. Now, this story is suggesting that there'll be sector-by-sector arrangements for migrations, which is something that we've heard before, but that there will also be new arrangements in terms of benefits and restricting benefits from new arrivals. Now, of course, this was also something that David Cameron had already started prior to the referendum. But I think the most interesting bit of this article is actually about what we do with the people that are already here, the people that have come here from Europe, who are living here, who are settled here, and who are working. And what it's suggesting is that actually there will be a cut-off date. And many of us had thought that the cut-off date might have been June 23rd. It seems that the lawyers have suggested that this is not lawful, and that actually the date that we trigger Article 50, which Tim Shipman seems to think will be the 15th of March. I've heard 15th, 16th, 17th is on the cards.
But not far away.
But not far away, and that will be the date. So after that point, people that come in won't have their rights guaranteed.
But it's very interesting how the rights of migrants and who can stay here and who cannot and who will come here in the future is going up the agenda. The trade deals have suddenly been shoved into the background, and there is a kind of consternation as to wondering how we will do with all these workers that's supposed and support so many industries.
Let's rattle through a few of the other stories. The Sunday Times also have the Labour Party in the fallout from the 2 by-elections. Tom Watson, the deputy leader, saying that they risk a wipeout in England as they had in Scotland unless they take a long, hard look at the way they've alienated the party's traditional supporters.
But what are they actually going to do about it? There's an awful lot of public hand-wringing on the part of some of these Labour Party, but they do not seem to be able to get rid of Corbyn.
No.
I mean, I would love to know what Watson has privately told Corbyn about, you know, time for you to go. Or has he?
Well, I mean, when you speak to any of the Labour moderates and you say, so what's the plan? There has to be a plan. There's always a plan. and now they sort of look at you quite mournfully and say, well, there simply isn't one.
And from Labour to UKIP, and we've got the Express, who say, the Sunday Express, who say Nigel and I, this is Nigel and Aaron Banks, the UKIP donor, are fed up with UKIP.
Well, this is one of my stories, actually,
Yeah.
and basically...
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes,
Sorry, I hadn't
yes.
spotted that. What a brilliant story from the Sunday Express.
We've had a chat with Aaron Banks today, and obviously in the wake of the Stoke by-election fallout, where the party's leader, Paul Nuttall, was unsuccessful in his attempt to be elected as the party's second MP. Basically, what he's saying is that he is going to quit, he's going to take his millions and not be part of UKIP unless they let him become chairman of the party, so that they can professionalise and modernise the party and move forward with it. He's also got a bit of a beef, as we've known for a long time, with Douglas Carswell, and this issue that aired on Question Time about whether or not Douglas Carswell indeed blocked Nigel Farage's knighthood has reared its ugly head again, and Aaron told me basically that if he becomes chairman, his first act will be to expel Douglas Carswell, which it's all bitter infighting again.
It certainly is.
Interesting to
Sunday
watch.
Telegraph, and they have Britain's new terror chief. This is Max Hill, talking about Islamic State and the threat of terror being the worst for a generation. His first interview since being appointed, this is.
This is Max Hill, who is the independent reviewer of terrorism legislations, the man who looks essentially to see whether the people who are keeping us safe will be able to do this. And he is talking about a level of terror threat akin to that of the 1970s, when, say, of 1974, at the height of the IRA bombing. Now, maybe this maybe not be a surprise to some people, but it is a rather sobering report on just the level of threat from ISIS, and also the age at which people are becoming radicalised. At the age of 14, people are watching ISIL videos and signing up, trying to leave Britain to
That's right. And
join
of course,
the army.
Terrorism, I mean, it has been on the agenda this week
Yeah.
with the story about Jamal al-Harith, who came back from Guantanamo Bay. He was living here for 10 years and then escaped to Syria and was blown up in a suicide bomb attack in Iraq. The thing I would have liked to have known from him, because it did cross my mind also to go and have a chat with him, is actually what he's going to do in terms of the surveillance powers of these people slipping in and out of the country.
OK, very quick last look at the Telegraph, because they got a picture of Emma Stone just ahead of the Oscars, the hot favourite to be actress, Best Actress. La La Land?
La La Land.
You saw it and didn't like it, I think.
Yes, I am that person who did not like La La Land.
You're the one.
But Hollywood did, because it's a it's a love song to Hollywood, how beautiful California is, and to everything that Hollywood stands for. So one would imagine that it would do incredibly well.
But it wouldn't get your vote.
No, it wouldn't get my vote. Maybe I'm just not enough of a romantic.
And Caroline, you're not a great film goer.
Do you know, I wish to say that I was, but having 3 children, this is my idea of a great night out, to be honest, being with you guys here today.
We're better than the movies, the papers. Maybe we could get an Oscar. Caroline and Anne, thank you so much for being with us. That is it for the papers so far tonight. We'll all be back at 11:30, though, for another look at the stories making the news tomorrow. So coming up next on the BBC News Channel, it's Reporters.